Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Susquehanna River Basin Commission's webinar focused on providing an overview of our Consumptive Use Mitigation Grant Program and a walkthrough of our online application. My name is John Bala, and I'm the manager of our Planning and Operations Program, which is responsible for managing this relatively new grant program at the Commission. I'm joined here today by Hillary Hollier, Julian Mazzaro, and Pierre McCoy, who are key members of our grant team, as well as several members of our executive management team and staff. To kick things off, we just want to go through a few webinar logistics for today. You'll note right out of the gate, you should have seen the webinars being recorded. The primary reason for that is to make it accessible to folks who are interested in seeing the content but weren't necessarily able to make it today to today's webinar. We ask that you please mute all lines so that we can get through the content, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for questions and answers related to what we've presented and other issues that may come to mind. We're anticipating the presentations to run approximately 30 to 40 minutes. We'll take Q&A after that. We ask that you, just so we can manage the questions, to please use the chat function. We have Pierre here in-house who will be monitoring that and stacking the questions for us to be able to respond to in an orderly fashion. If there are ones that we can't address or need to take as a homework assignment, or for whatever reason folks have additional questions they'd like to pose or maybe aren't comfortable doing so today, absolutely send your questions to the dedicated email account we have here and all over our website for the grant program, as well as the dedicated phone line extension. You could leave a voice message. We've tried to be pretty diligent about responding to those in a timely manner. So to get into the grant program, starting out with kind of our overall purpose with launching this grant program, and this year is year 3 of the funding opportunity for us. Our aim is to attract and fund projects that help mitigate consumptive use of water or otherwise improve drought resilience in the basin. Basically, we're aiming to fund projects that will either reduce water use, develop water storage to offset water use, engage in water quality environmental improvement projects, alter operations such that during a future drought, that water supply system, that watershed, that stream system, the groundwater supply is better poised to make it through a drought event. We'll reiterate a number of times how important it is to refer to our grant program guidelines for this grant offering. It's posted on our webpage. It has all the details an applicant would want to know in terms of eligibility, program requirements, cash match, but we'll hit the highlights here today. In terms of eligible applicants, they include these 4 categories here: project sponsors, which is another way of saying projects that have a permit issued through our agency or otherwise an approval from our agency are eligible. Local, state, federal governments, obviously, nonprofit organizations, and then academicians are all eligible applicants. If, say, for instance, you're a consultant and you're interested in being eligible, the easy button there is to partner with one of the eligible applicant types listed here, and that's a way to get in the door with a project that you'd like to seek funding for. In terms of eligible project types, we've broken those into 4 primary categories. They're listed here. I'll go through a quick summary of what those are, and then we'll provide a brief example of a project in each of these categories. Starting at the top are the water supply projects. They're basically entail developing water supply storage in, say, a federal, state, or a privately owned water supply storage reservoir. Could be an abandoned flooded quarry, and any of the like. Project operation alternatives involve changing operations all year round, or even just during drought events, including maintaining adequate conservation releases from water supply reservoirs, perhaps adding surface water sources in combination with existing groundwater sources to conjunctively use surface water and groundwater sources during drought periods. The third category we refer to as demand modification alternatives. That's really the water conservation type projects, ones that produce water savings, basically lessen the water use footprint during times of drought or all year round. And then the last category, environmental and water quality alternatives, is broadest in scope. It entails wetland and stream restoration, groundwater recharge, stormwater management, and many more in that kind of vein, where we're not necessarily looking for a water quantity specific trade-off, but through water quality improvements, habitat improvements, systems would be left after project implementation being more resilient to future drought events. The first example we have to highlight is in the water supply arena. It's actually a project we were able to develop in cooperation with Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority. Bill Meyer Quarry, it's a flooded abandoned limestone quarry in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We were able to, through study and actual pump testing, prove this asset could be used for consumptive use mitigation during droughts, and entered in an agreement to dedicate 425 million gallons of water supply storage for use during low flow periods. We're proud of it as an example of a public-private partnership in developing a mitigation project. This one's active and in our current suite of assets for mitigation. Excuse me. The second one's in the project operations category. This one's more hypothetical, but think of a public or private reservoir that exists for any number of purposes, and the project concept would be to revise operations to implement a conservation release or low flow augmentation release, basically use that water storage asset to provide low flow management benefits during droughts, with the aim of an outcome related to a more restored natural flow regime in the downstream reach. The picture in the photograph shows Lake Chillisquaque at Montour Preserve. This particular facility is used as a source of water for power generation, but the potential for low flow management benefits exists at that facility as well. In the demand modification category of projects, this is one we've entered into in cooperation with Infinite Cooling, MIT startup company, and again, Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority, in particular the Susquehanna Resource Recovery Center in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. We are piloting a water conservation technology at this facility. Obviously, they use water through the evaporative cooling process. You can see the cooling tower cells in the right-hand side of the photograph. We've partnered to install an innovative technology, a mesh screen that's hit with an electrostatic charge that recovers water, reduces plume. Water can be reused in the cooling process or otherwise at the facility, and so we get a double benefit of improved water savings and plume abatement through this water conservation technology. The last example is in the environmental and water quality arena. This one is a project that we've funded with the Upper Susquehanna Coalition in Steuben County, New York. It entailed the acquisition of a 100-acre property. You can see from the photograph, much of it is wet. The project involves 30 acres of restoration on site in wetlands and streams. The property has been dedicated as state land, and it's a good example, we think, of agency conservation group partnership working for kind of where goals overlap in various programs. So this year, and similar to the past 2 years, the funding opportunity has a total grant funding limit ranged at $4 million to $6 million. The grant program guidelines specify individual project funding goal of $100,000 or more. Our aim there is to signify a desire to fund more significant, more impactful projects, although we have certainly funded projects in year 1 and 2 that have been below that target. In year 2, we made a transition to a 2-tiered cash match requirement, and we're carrying that same requirement forward again here in year 3. That's a requirement to provide 10% of the total grant funding request as cash match for requests greater than or equal to $500,000, and then 25% for total grant funding requests exceeding $500,000. The grant period of performance specified in the grant guidelines and has been consistent through all 3 years of our offering has been a target of 3 years from initiation to completion. My colleagues are probably reminding me or thinking that I should be reminded to mention that an important thing to note here with our funding is it's non-federal and it's non-state, which means other federal or state grant funding could be contributed to meet the cash match requirement in our grant program, which is a unique thing we've tried to highlight for applicants to take advantage of. This is my last slide, and then I'll transition to the schedule and switch gears to a walkthrough of our application. The way we approach reviewing applications we get in-house is the first step is to determine whether they meet the eligibility requirements, meaning is the applicant eligible, is the project eligible, and has the cash match requirement been met. Fundamentally, those 3 boxes need to be checked, and then applications go to committee review. We have a committee of 8 staff we've selected with a good cross-section of years of expertise, different technical backgrounds, program representation, to review applications and technical review. Really, the way we do this is we build a score sheet that is very much based on the criteria in one of the final sections in the grant program guidelines called Application Review Criteria. And in there is a matrix that spells out these evaluation review criteria and the point allocations we've allocated to them. They include spelling out the project purpose, the quantitative benefits expected to be achieved, the scope of work, the project budget, site access, permits required, and if there is an operation and maintenance component, experience of the applicant and the applicant team. And then we have a series of kind of bonus points that are allocated to features or elements we feel are important. They include whether the applicant has leveraged other partners besides just the applicant. If the proposed project is located in a priority watershed, those are shown in the graphic on the right, and the priority watershed map is on our grant program webpage. Whether or not the applicant can demonstrate how the project will address or has considered and will address climate change and increased climate resilience that will be realized through implementation of the project. Whether the project is located in an environmental justice area, if the applicant has engaged the environmental justice community, and if the project, when implemented, will have tangible benefits to that environmental justice community. We've tried to be real transparent in how we've approached our review of projects and forecasting the criteria we'll use in doing so, and we encourage applicants to really focus on bolstering their application in these areas to the extent possible. So I'll close with a rundown of our schedule. As I hope you all know, our application went live November 1. It closes 4 p.m. on January 31. Typically, we've used the months of February and March to conduct our application reviews. To the extent we have a March commission meeting where we can brief our commissioners on the suite of applications we received and our recommendations for awardees at that March meeting, and be poised to announce awarded grants in the April timeframe, in which case we've switched gears to grant agreement development, scope of work attachment, and budget attachment components so that we are ready to execute grant agreements with awarded applicants on July 1, commensurate with the start of our fiscal year, so funding would be available to begin drawing at that time. So with that, I think we'll hold questions till the end to capture them in one lump sum. I'll turn things over to Julian Mazzaro, and he's going to give us a walkthrough of our online application for folks to get a little familiarity with that and its requirements.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm going to pause here a second just so I can share my screen. Okay. So as John said, my name's Julian Mazzaro. I am part of the grants team here. We also have on the line with us today Bailey Anderson. She's our implementation specialist with AmpliFund. I believe Bailey is muted at the moment, but she will be available to help answer any technical questions regarding our online application. For those that have applied in the past, this will be something new this year, but the Commission has migrated to a third-party software provider, and that is AmpliFund. And so this is to help us manage the grants from application through review and even during the actual, if awarded, managing those applications and the financials and whatnot. So our application this year is no longer an in-house built system. It is now through AmpliFund. Before I jump into that actual application, I just want to highlight a couple of things here. On our homepage, we've now added a button to make it easy for you to migrate to the grant webpage. It's no longer sort of buried in multiple menus. So let's go ahead and click in there because there are a few documents that I want to touch base on before we get to the AmpliFund application itself. So if you haven't already checked out our Consumptive Use Mitigation Grant Program webpage, please do. We've got a lot of important information on here, and we do try and update this regularly. You'll notice at the top there's an Apply For grant. We'll touch on that in a moment here, but there are key documents that you can review ahead of developing your application. As John mentioned, the grant guidelines are on here, worth taking a look at if you haven't read those. Grant agreement template, this is something I'd encourage you to please read. We discuss in there, or rather you'll see the conditions for which we'll disperse funds. You'll see the conditions for any bidding requirements and so forth. So please do read that. It's an important component of this, and it is pretty much how, if you're awarded, your final agreement will look. So down here under key grant application documents, I want to highlight this detailed budget spreadsheet. This is a required document. You will need to complete this and upload this to your online application, and I'll take a moment here to go over that. But I also want to point out that the matching funds letter, this is also a required document. Both these can be uploaded to the online application. I'm going to pause here a second so I can bring up the detailed budget spreadsheet to just highlight a few things. So we've included some instructions in here. They're pretty straightforward, so I won't go over those, but please do check them out if you get stuck anywhere or have questions, wondering, about how to put certain information in. I think there's about 5 or 6 pages. We've included photos to try and make it easy. Regarding the detailed budget spreadsheet itself, anywhere you see gray boxes, that's information for you to complete. If you don't see a gray box, then it's something that the spreadsheet will automatically tally up. So you'll notice here that this table and the one below it, any information you enter, the spreadsheet will automatically calculate. I want to point something out, and I'll point it out a couple of times throughout the application. You'll notice up here that we have year 1, year 2, and 3 as starting July 1. As John mentioned, our period of performance for these grants will start July 1, 2024. This is important because if you're entering information such as the very first task that you put in the application, it should start on July 1, 2024 or after that. If you have costs that are before that date and you're awarded a grant, it's not something we will cover. So please keep that in mind. Our goal is to have all these agreements for those awardees executed and ready to go by July 1. So that's where you should look to start your budgets and your tasks. I'm going to scroll down here to the first task page because I want to highlight a couple of key items. So on the detailed budget spreadsheet here, you'll be able to put in your task number, your task title, which keep it as a sort of brief description of what you're going to do, And then you can select different budget categories. These are the allowable budget categories that the SRBC provides. Certainly, once you've selected that, please enter a brief description of the work that you'll be performing or hope to be funded by the SRBC, and then include the annual budget for each one of those. One item that's slightly different here is that in this budget category menu, if you select cash match or in-kind match, you'll then be able to select the available sources. These are the same things that are in the grant guidelines, but these are the sources of match that we accept. When you do so, similar to what you would do for another budget category, just put in a brief description. However, you'll notice that when you put in a value in here, let's say $5,000, the spreadsheet's automatically going to show it with parentheses around it. That's just so that the Excel spreadsheet doesn't total this up in the above tables in a way that it counts it towards your requested grant funds. So I just want to point those things out. They're kind of important, and this spreadsheet itself is extremely important to our review and subsequently how we manage these grants. I'm going to stop my screen here for a moment and go back to the SRBC webpage. All right. So let's go ahead and walk through applying for a grant. We want to highlight some features about the application and ways that you may be able to help us in our review. You'll notice that when you come in here, right away you're going to see some of the same details that you see on our webpage. We have down here key information about our funding resources. John mentioned that this funding is non-federal, non-state, so you can certainly use other grant dollars as a match, or you can take our funds and go get additional match or additional funds with other providers. Here again, the award information, you'll see the start date, July 1, 2024. That is the date that your budgets and your tasks should start, and an end date of June 30th, 2027. We note, again, application period opens and closes. Please keep this in mind that we close January 31st at 4 p.m. We will not accept applications after that, and the system won't allow you to enter or submit an application after that. We also do have down here that we ask that you try and get any questions into us prior to January 24th. That's just the guarantee that we can respond. After that, there's no guarantee that we'll be able to respond to any questions. And in the last couple of years, we've seen normally as we get close to the closing date or the very day that we do close, we tend to get a lot of questions, and it can be hard to keep up. And so we want to make sure that we've answered your questions or helped you out with anything that you run into with the application. So if I can make a recommendation, it's start early. I'm going to go ahead and click apply here. When you click apply, if you haven't already done so, you will need to register an account. It's fairly simple, but you'll need to enter an email address, a name, first and last name. One thing I want to recommend, if you're registering an account, make sure that it is for the actual grant application or grant applicant themselves. If you are a consultant, you can be a user to the grantee and you can help them with the application, but make sure that the actual grantee, or rather applicant, if awarded, would be a grantee, that they're the ones applying here. I'm going to go ahead and just enter a email address, kind of long, unnecessary email address, but so since I already registered, you'll see my name, and in this case, I've written this as a demo up here in the upper corner, but for you, this would be your name and your organization name. Right off the bat, one of the things I want to recommend, just come down here and click Save. This will save the SRBC's grant opportunity to your account, so that way you'll be able to easily access it anytime you log into AmpliFund. And then afterwards, you'll be able to add users. So I want to show you how you can add users, and there's a couple of ways. You can either click the AmpliFund logo up here, or you can come up here and click your name, and go to Account Information. And then click Users. And then click Add Users. And here again, you'll be able to put your email address, the first and last name of the individual that will be, maybe you'll have someone assisting you, you can enter their information, and then you can invite them. One quick item I'll note here is that you have the ability to add users and give them certain roles. They can either be an editor or an administrator. Editors can edit applications and they can edit their own account information, whereas administrators can create, delete, edit applications, submit applications. They can also create, edit, and add users. So I'll leave that to you to decide if you're adding users, what role you prefer them to have. However, you will need to select a role in order to invite them. So let's go ahead and jump into the application. So as you can see, when I click Save, it saved the SRBC application here to my account. Before moving into the application, I want to note some navigation features. These icons up here allow you to move forward and backward in the application. Anytime you come in and you want to view other items, simply just click there and it'll take you to those items. You'll also note that there are a couple of features up here: print, help, download, and save and continue. I'll touch on save and continue in a moment, but print allows you to print this opportunity details. Help will take you to AmpliFund's online guide. If you have any questions about the application, I encourage you to reach out to us through our CU grant contact information, as we may be able to better direct you with regard to the application. And download will allow you to download the opportunity details in the application itself. I'll note save and continue here. I want to actually jump to another section in the application just to point out a couple of things. And bear with me here, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. So throughout the application, you'll have the ability to save and continue, or mark as complete. Each one of these allows you to save, they just provide a little bit different functionality. Save will allow you to save an application even if you don't have all of the fields entered. I would encourage you to save often. The system does time out after 30 minutes. And I know in the past, folks, you get started on an application and you get called away because you've got multiple things going on, and then you come back and the application's timed out and you've lost the information you've entered. So please, whenever you can, just click save. It's just a good habit to have. Save and continue allows you to save without all the fields entered or completed and move to the next section. And then mark as complete. You may mark an application section complete once you've provided all the required information. Any information that's required is denoted with an asterisk. You will need to have each section of the application marked as complete in order to submit it. However, at any time, as long as you save or save and continue, or even mark as complete but don't submit, you'll be able to edit the application. So again, just keep in mind, it times out after 30 minutes. Please save often. If for any reason that you were to submit an application early but found you made a mistake, please reach out to us through our CU grant contact info. We may be able to reopen your application to allow you to correct that error. But after January 31 at 4 p.m., we'll no longer be able to do that. So what I'd like to do is highlight some of the features within AmpliFund by looking at some of the application forms. So I won't go over all of these forms, but there are a couple that I think are worth pointing out. However, before jumping in, I do want to note that you can, if you'd like, print each one of these individually. And also, as you work on these forms, you'll see the status change. It will move from new to in progress to complete as you move through and complete those forms. So one way to check to make sure you have everything ready to go before you submit is just come back here and check the status. First form I want to jump into is project purpose and benefits. So for those that applied through our in-house system, you'll know that we typically had a lot of character-restricted fields. New this year, what AmpliFund provides is a formatting toolbar. This is something that we don't character-restrict these fields, but I would encourage you to bullet or number key information and make sure you're using the formatting toolbar to organize the information that you think is important to your project. This is actually, if you can bullet or number items that you think are important, it can be really helpful to us as reviewers. I think in both year 1 and 2, we had roughly 40 plus applications. So having things organized and calling things out in a clear manner is a great help. And I would encourage you along the way, if you can, just to ask yourself questions of, does this, explanation or response to the question, does this explain the project well? Is this information key to the project that I'm providing? If you can, maybe have somebody unfamiliar with your project just read through to make sure that what's in there makes sense to somebody who would be unfamiliar with the project. We continue to try and find a balance between a lot of information and try and find the balance for projects. We tend to get too much or too little information in certain applications. So it can be really hard to review some of these and make a good assessment. I'll give an example. Sometimes folks might put in a scope of work component. A task is simply to buy water meters, but they don't explain what the purpose is or what the intent of those meters are. Have they thought about where they're located, how they're going to use the data from that, things of that nature. So again, I would encourage you to really think about someone that's unfamiliar with your project. How can you organize this information and help them? One other feature here, and I'll highlight this feature throughout a couple additional forms. You'll notice some fields or some areas of the application allow you to build them out. And what do I mean by that? It allows you to answer a question to add more information. We've tried to minimize as much information so that folks aren't overwhelmed when they come into the application. So when you come down to certain sections, you'll notice that you can answer yes or no, and if you answer yes, you'll be able to add additional information. For example, here, you can provide any type of water benefit that your project provides, and you'll be able to add numeric values and select the units. And again, whenever you can, just click Save. Go to our grant-funded budget. One item that is new this year is that we're defaulting to reimbursement as the funding method. It's not that we are prohibiting advanced funding. However, we would like, if that is something that you need, to specifically request that. If you do need advanced funding, please select that from the select yes to that question, and you'll be able to provide a brief explanation. Again, this isn't, SRBC is not guaranteeing that it'll provide that method, but we're trying to get better at how we manage these grants. And one of the things that's caused a lot of confusion is whether you should use reimbursement or advanced funding. I won't go over those, but we have additional information in the grant guidelines where we touch on this, as well as the grant agreement template. And I can't say it enough, please read both those documents. They're very helpful on this information. The other key item here with this is that the preferred funding method, it gets memorialized in the grant agreement, but it also gets set up in AmpliFund. So if you're awarded a grant, it matters both in terms of your agreement and then how we proceed with funding distribution through the AmpliFund system itself. SRBC does not combine these methods of funding, so it's either reimbursement or advanced funding. You'll notice that you have a table down here. This should be relatively easy to fill out if you've completed the detailed budget spreadsheet ahead of time. Just come in and enter the same task title and the total for that task that you are requesting grant funding from SRBC. Key point here is that this budget should reflect only the funding you are requesting from SRBC. If you have a larger project that you want to parcel part of that out and seek grant funding from us, you may do that, but only include the information that you are requesting funds for in this application and in this budget. Down here, you'll notice we've asked that you acknowledge once you've completed that table. Once you do so, you may upload the detailed budget spreadsheet. Again, this is required. We'll need this to review the application. If it's not provided, the application is deemed administratively incomplete and we will not review them. I will note here, if you have some sort of supporting budget information, perhaps you've obtained multiple contractor quotes or you've already been through a bid process, and you think that that information is relevant to our review, you may upload that information. However, I'd ask that, again, sort of being mindful of would this make sense to somebody not familiar with the project, and you know, not to overwhelm with providing a bunch of uploads on that aspect of it. And then just to reiterate, the matching funds commitment letter, again, available on our webpage. It's also required upload. Please upload that here. Most of these other forms you'll find to be self-explanatory, and they use the same features that I've highlighted here, whether it's a formatting toolbar or drop-down menus. So please, you know, start early, take your time. Again, I want to highlight, if you can, please save your applications as you go, because they do time out. The system will time out. To submit an application, after you've marked all of these complete, you will be able to go to the submit page, and then you'll be able to submit. You'll notice that right now I can't, because I haven't completed any of those sections of the application. I will note again, the first project task in your scope of work and your budget should start on July 1, 2024. And your budget should reflect only that for you know, what you are requesting SRBC grant funds. And again, just final reminder there, we have until January 31st, 4 p.m. After that, the application system will close.
We're going to transition now to the question and answer portion of today's session, and Pierre McCoy here of our team has kindly populated a set of questions from the chat, so we'll attempt to go through them as best we can. We'll state the question so everybody's on the same page, and we'll attempt to answer as many or all of these as we can. So the first one on the list is, do you have pre-application meetings? Which is great, great question, because we actually earmarked it as an icebreaker question. We get it all the time. We do not do pre-application meetings currently. It's a decision we've made and applied in all 3 years of the grant funding opportunity. It's basically, we don't have extensive resources to conduct. You know, last year I think we got 43 applications. If we were asked to do 40 pre-application meetings a year, we just haven't been able to commit the resources to do that. So we haven't had pre-application meetings. We aren't having pre-application meetings. As a compromise, we have spelled out what we think is needed by an applicant to prepare a successful application in our grant program guidelines. We have a dedicated email account and phone line that we've prided ourselves in turning around responses within a few business days of those questions, and we've been real diligent about doing that. So that's open to you as a resource as well. Question 2, is your funding federal or state? Our funding is not federal, and our funding is not state. So a lot of the grant requirements associated with, having match sources that aren't federal or aren't state aren't applicable to our grant. You could certainly have grant funding from a federal or state grant source, and you can use that to meet your cash match requirement for our grant.
We have a question to confirm: a for-profit company that operates under an SRBC groundwater permit would be eligible. Yes, if you hold an approval from the commission, you're a project sponsor or hold some other type of approval, you are eligible. If you check our grant guidelines, we do provide an additional sort of definition on each one of the eligible applicant types. We have a question here. When you talk about the cash match, what does that mean? It's a good question. So on our grant guidelines, we spell out different forms of what we will accept as cash match. That can include something like direct labor. For example, if you're a municipality and you have employees that will be working directly on this project, you're going to be paying those employees to help implement that project. You may count their labor as cash match towards your application. It is restricted to several types, so I would encourage you to check the grant guidelines to review those, because each one of those is sort of spelled out. But I'll give you another example. If you have maybe some materials, construction materials that you'll be purchasing during the project, you can certainly put that down as well as a cash match. But please do read the guidelines. We do provide more detail on that. Next question.
Were SRBC funds used to acquire the property in Steuben County, New York? Yes, they were. I will say, though, there were a number of other attractive elements to that particular project that resulted in the decision to fund that property acquisition. It was the 30 acres of stream and wetland restoration. It was the fact that the acquisition and the restoration work would be preserved in perpetuity through being transferred to state lands and a number of other things. Because we have seen applications for straight-up property acquisitions in and of themselves that were not selected for funding in past rounds. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, and I'll add to that. We have, if part of your project, if you're interested in acquiring property, I will note that you will want to select a funding method that is advance funding, because you're probably not likely going to seek reimbursement for the purchase of property. You'll need that money ahead of any purchase. And as John mentioned, our funds were used for that project in Steuben County, but we have done others where they have, again, shown connection to water benefits. They have provided public access. So it has to have some meaningful connection to the grant program intent.
Is a planning project for an additional reservoir eligible? I'll break that one into two pieces. Developing or establishing, constructing a new reservoir or water storage source is eligible under the grant as a water supply alternative. The second part, a planning project, the way our grant is designed, it prioritizes projects for implementation. So projects that have a larger portion of the grant funding request allocated to the implementation or construction or actual execution of a project. So the planning component is not as attractive under the way our grant is described. That said, if you can establish that planning phase is critical to get to that next step, and we have funded projects in the past that have been more planning focused, but we've also not funded several because of that distinction in our desire to get more towards, implementable projects, executable projects versus just planning studies.
Yeah, so we have a question here. Is the purchase and installation of smart meters eligible? So under our demand modification alternative, we look for water conservation-minded projects. As I sort of noted when I was talking about the application itself, purchasing meters is one thing, but explaining how that would provide water benefits to whether it's the system, the users, the watershed, that's another component. So it would have to have a meaningful connection to that. I would recommend here, again, if you want to look at something like meters, make sure that you're providing more information than just simply the purchase of those meters. Are you going to be using the data from those smart meters in a way that allows you to reduce water loss or reduce your non-revenue water loss? So really think about what the benefits are there.
Are applicants required to have a conversation with SRBC about the project or do a site visit prior to submitting an application? If not required, are you willing to talk through a project to get feedback on it? I think we addressed that one previously in the context of pre-application meetings. Applicants aren't required to have a conversation with us about a project. We aren't currently having pre-application conversations with applicants. We have not, and we aren't committed to doing site visits prior to an application, or basically we aren't committed to walking or talking through a project to get feedback on it. We do, the guidelines are set up to try to really help applicants navigate eligibility or how the project will fare through the scoring routine, particularly at the end of the grant program guidelines. Questions can be posed in our dedicated email account and voicemail account, but we have also been diligent there about being true to our position on not having pre-application meetings. So we haven't been rendering responses in the email account or the phone line that would give projects a shortcut to an eligibility determination. We just haven't been going there.
Although, this is Jason Oiler, General Counsel, I would encourage you, if you have questions, to use that and ask. Because, essentially I'm not on the decision team. So, if it comes to eligibility and you're really not sure or you're confused by the guidelines, ask the question and likely you'll have a conversation with me. But as for walking through projects or, saying this would be good or bad, I can give you general advice I have in previous rounds, but it's, it really is covered by the guidelines.
So there's a question of, is there a financial need component to the application process? And if so, what are the limits? We don't have anything that allows you to call that out explicitly. However, you could certainly provide that information in multiple narrative components of the application itself. You could explain, what the financial background is of the entity and demonstrate that need. So
the question is a planning project for a new water source eligible? I think the response here will be similar to the one that talked about planning for a new reservoir. A new water source is eligible for funding under the grant program, particularly in the context, I think, of if you're going at a conjunctive use management project where you're looking as a drought resilience measure, you're looking to better juggle and, just diversify your source portfolio by having a surface water and groundwater source that you can use, or even a water storage source that you can use during times of drought. So that project concept or project piece is eligible. Again, in terms of it being just planning focused, it wouldn't score as well as a project that's ready for implementation or construction or development. So you just have to make a connection that this is a means to an end that you can get there, and that would, that would improve the competitiveness of your score. But certainly a planning type project won't score as well as an implementation based project. If an applicant has received SRBC Consumptive Use Mitigation Grant in the past and submits multiple applications this year for different projects, are they less likely to receive funding again? No. We'll review the applications on their competitive merit against the evaluation criteria and the grant program guidelines. We literally extract those evaluation criteria into a score sheet, and that's what our review committee uses. There's no surprises there. We've intentionally tried to be transparent about that. We have funded projects in year one for applicants that got grant awards in year two. If we're getting good projects and good applications, and they're coming from the same folks, if they're going to get competitive scores, then we'll fund them.
There's a question here about condensate return from steam and to reuse in a boiler eligibility. So I guess, in effect, if you're reusing condensate for boiler water, is that an eligible project? So here again, under our demand modification alternatives, we provide for the ability to submit a water reuse or water recycle project. That is eligible. Just to sort of reiterate that point a little bit, John mentioned in his presentation the infinite cooling project we have at Lancaster County Solid Waste Management Authority's Susquehanna Resource Management Complex. That project does reuse the, or rather, I guess it captures the steam from its cooling towers with the intent that it could be reused. So certainly, again, if you have a project like that, it is eligible under this grant. We have a question. Can you explain the requirements for land ownership? For example, is the applicant required to own the land along the full length of a stream in a stream restoration project, or is a landowner consent letter acceptable?
Sure, this is Jason. We don't require land ownership. What we would look for is sufficient protection at the extent, for say, in this example with stream restoration, that it can be protected and it's going to be in place for the useful life of that, that effort. That could be an easement. That could be a number of things, but we like I said, in one instance, we accepted a transfer into state land. So it can look a lot of different ways. I think the important touch point is that you're providing something that gives the commission comfort that the money spent on this project will be in place and legally protected for the lifespan of what you're proposing.
Next question is, would repairs to an existing reservoir be considered as a water supply alternative, WSA, or a project operational alternative, POA project? That's a great question. I guess the answer would be, it kind of could depend. I will describe two projects we funded in year one of the grant offering that were kind of directly related to this question. They were existing public water supply reservoirs in a small rural public water supply system. The projects involved the installation of infrastructure, basically repairs to existing reservoir outlet works to better implement Pennsylvania DEP water allocation permit required conservation releases, or even the transfer of water more efficiently or monitored more effectively across their system of reservoirs. And so both those projects were funded as project operational alternatives because the repairs, the infrastructure improvements, were directly related to the way the project was operated, not so much an increase in their water supply storage, an allocation of a percentage of their water supply storage towards low flow management. It was chiefly related to infrastructure upgrades at those reservoirs to operate them better, to be more resilient or sustainable during drought periods. So I guess I'd say if the repairs that are directly related to operating more efficiently, they're POAs. If they're related to increasing water supply storage or allocating a portion of it to other low flow management purpose as a storage asset, then they'd fall more into the WSA category.
We have a question here. Are grant funds eligible for a old water pipe line replacement to eliminate leaks? It's a great question, and no, they really aren't. We consider that sort of a routine maintenance, which is not something that we'll fund. We're looking for projects that go sort of above and beyond the routine maintenance. You'll see a section in the grant guidelines that sort of discusses some of the ineligible items that we won't fund or under the grant program. And with that, I would say something we didn't highlight, but I would encourage, if you go to our Consumptive Use Mitigation Grant webpage and you scroll to the bottom, you will be able to see the folks that were awarded funds in years 1 and 2. It's a good way to just kind of gauge or see what projects. Those aren't the only projects we'll fund, but it's an opportunity for you to see other projects we have funded. But again, if it's a routine maintenance or a routine infrastructure replacement, it's not something we will fund. Is money expended for the project prior to July 1, 2024 eligible to use for matching funds? No, we require, if you're going to be providing matching funds, a cash match, it must be expended during the period of performance of the grant. So in this case, it must be expended between July 1, 2024 and June 30th, 2027.
Do you have a set amount of the total funding available earmarked for each project category? The answer to that is no. We have not earmarked a certain percentage to each of those 4 project categories in year 1, 2, or in this year, year 3. We have had some internal discussions about prioritizing certain project categories in the future, or even project settings, watersheds in the future, just to try to drive towards certain project types or to drive towards projects in certain settings, but we have not gone there yet. So for this year, that we have no preset allocation of projects. There's no weighting of projects based on the category. We're reviewing them all competitively against the evaluation criteria, regardless of what category they are in. Can repairs for dam safety be eligible if the storage volume in the reservoir, pond supports flood mitigation? The lake is also used for recreation and fish habitat. Yeah, just the way the question's worded, I'm not sure that would be eligible for grant funding. Certainly reservoir repairs, if they can be tied to an operational or water storage component that would be beneficial during droughts or low flow management, yes, that would be eligible. But if it's to address a dam safety deficiency and the current uses are primarily recreation or flood risk management, fish habitat, without that low flow management, that drought resilience, that component, it probably would not score well, and it might not be eligible. You have something to add?
Yeah, but to John's to the question and John's point, our application looks at water benefits. However, we do look at projects with stacked benefits. So if you are providing other benefits like water recreation or some other public benefit there, it's worthwhile to include it in an application. Our focus is water benefits, but again, we're looking for stacked benefits as well. So, please do highlight that information in your application.
That's a good point, Julian, because in the quantitative benefits section, you could make a case for the flood mitigation benefit. You could make a case for the fisheries benefit, the recreation benefit. And recreation is, especially water-based recreation, is a focus of ours. I would just, to make it a stronger argument in the application, I would try to make some connection to low flow management, drought management, something in that vein. If that reservoir, makes a conservation release of some sort to protect the downstream environment during low flow periods, that would be an argument that I would want to make in an application related to that question.
So, question: are previous grant awardees applicants available as public records for review? I'm going to assume that question is, are the previous grant awardees' applications available for as public records for review? Okay, so if grant was successful and they were awarded funds from the commission under our records regulation under 18 CFR 801-14, the applications would be public records for successful grant awardees.
Okay, if you were counting, you noticed that we went through 19 questions, great questions, and we appreciate that, and hopefully our responses were helpful. We're not seeing any other questions come in through the chat. Oh, we just got one. We saw a lot of people dropping off, so we wanted to get back on and close out. But one last one came through here for a wetland restoration project. Would you want a permanent easement?
Permanent easement would, I think, it's not like a requirement, right? So if you came and said we can do wetland restoration and we can do a 25-year easement or a permanent easement, I would presume in the scoring of that project, the permanent easement would score better, but it wouldn't necessarily be a killer if it were a time-limited easement, provided that time was ample. I think it also would depend on the amount of money you're asking for, to go into that sort of calculation. So it's not a hard and fast answer. I think the permanent easement would be preferred, especially for something that would be a permanent thing, but, the 15-year, the CREP project, we'd have to look at the protections that are provided under that, but 15 years, again, that's like less. So, I mean, it wouldn't be kick you out of eligibility. It may affect on how it's reviewed and scored.
All right, well, thank you again for your time this morning. It's 10:05.
One thing to note, we will be posting this video, so if anyone wants to reference any of the items we've covered today, this will be available on our grant webpage. Yeah,
thanks for the reminder on that. We'll post the video on the webpage. We're going to attempt to call out some time chunks so that people, if they just want to get right to the walkthrough of the application, they can get there. If they want to see the overview of eligibility, they can get there quickly. Please use the email account and phone account to pose additional questions that may come up after today's session. Thank you for your interest, and we appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing your applications come through the system. Thank you all.